Teary-eyed I have become. The experience of which I am about to share was more than fun. A stillness and a quiet built. And so did the pink castle in which I sat. A warmness and a sense of power also built. Atop this pink castle, which was not very big, but its shape reminded me more of a castle with turrets and such. First, from my perspective, it had a green-capped tower with a shape that reminds of the waning moon, and then one of the waxing moon, then of the full moon, and then there was a red sword, kind of like garnet, but not as dark. And it pointed up. Its shape indicated that it was not too long, but it was definitely longer than a dagger. I felt a pitter-patter upon me. And a strong, euphoric shudder, relieving all pain. I believe that this was intended to be the first full book on the subject of the Golden Dawn Cypher Manuscript, and that it was the time to release it, rather than waiting till about now. If this was something that was made in the 40s, then, and or do they mean the 50s or the 60s? Because which edition of this, or which print, is it referring to as 50 years going by? I also agree quite fully with the idea that the backstory is not as important as the information being presented. Some things come in, are taken away, are given different meaning because of transcription errors, and the text generally reads right to left and top to bottom. Some of the English and French would be like that. Hebrew was used for the numbers. There are some illustrations, and there's questions why some of these illustrations were. Symbolically, some of the steps might not be needed, but they're listed nonetheless. As stated before, This is a multi-language document. The Kabbalah herein listed is probably from the Christian Kabbalah, so not everything would agree with the Jewish manuscripts. And the linguistic terms of Kabbalah tend not to be in the Biblical Hebrew or the ancient Aramaic, as it would be called. Armya. Would it be pronounced as Hebrew? Would it? No. As a side note, I'm saying that. Aleister Crowley redid the Golden Dawn's correspondence tablet and released it as Liber 777. I don't know what the introduction or whatever to that book says, but that's the case. There's some stuff said about the they've inserted some Thracian and ancient Egyptian ideas into here, and some of this sort of indicates when this was, rather than from the 1800s. It would have been from the 1900s. In 1561, the Cypher key was published to this text. 1790 and 1887 are clear dates that this manuscript would have to be after. Some things became a lot more commonly known after 1955, but the information of that could have been known, so that's not as clear of a marker. Eliphas Levi was more of a scholar than a practitioner, and it's thought that some of the things that he put into the manuscript were because of that fact. There is reason to think that William Yeats and, W.B. Yeats and William Blake weren't the influences that people would think were. Well, certainly influences in thought, but not to the point of copying out lines. It is undeniable that 1974 would have been a point when the manuscript had existed, as well as 1972, and it had instruction back to the day, that harkens back to the day when there was this split between the Catholics and the Protestants, to the point where, they couldn't be part of the same mystical orders because of some of the wars that were going on. Some things have to occur after 1887. There's some stuff about the Tree of Life, about how it's made in a peculiar way, and how people talk about, dot would be the gate, so some of the implications about that should be obvious, that it's a sort of spiritual gate, sort of like the crown, but rather than a peak, it's a gate. Same principle, different inflection. The talk about an older form kind of falls through, putting it after 1924, most likely, or at least part of the manuscript. Now, when we say that their mythology was quite a bit biblical, one of the things that we must do about that is we should probably point out the fact that biblical means influenced by so many of these other things. So when we specifically say, grab this from the Eleusinian mysteries, the Bible sort of required the Greek philosophy and the Greek rituals and stuff to provoke its form. Although the writers of the Bible denied the power thereof are denied the importance or the validity of the forms of which they got those things from. Some of the things about constructing an order and stuff, it's sort of a glamour magic.